Hello everybody, and welcome to the Shane Plays first look slash review, I suppose, of the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Player's Handbook. A lot of people very excited about this out there right now. Actually, today is Thursday the 14th. I actually bought this last Friday. I've been looking it over and trying to get a better sense of it, trying to get around to getting this video recorded and a blog post done. There will be, if you look in the YouTube information about the video, there will be a link to a companion blog post to this on my blog at shaneplays.com, which will have a photo gallery and kind of a summary of what we're going to talk about in this video. But just in case you're wondering, this is 5th edition. The Player's Handbook is the only core rule book out other than the free rules, which are sort of a limited but playable version of 5th edition that's available in PDF form. And it came out to select game stores that are sort of in a network with Wizards of the Coast on August 8th, last Friday. Now, for everybody else, if you can't get to a game store that is part of that network, it'll be available on the 19th, I think, which is next Tuesday. And that'll be, bookstores, game stores, Amazon.com, etc. And in fact, if you get it from Amazon, you can pre-order it now, and I think they've knocked quite a bit off the price, about $20. So, anyway, here's the book. Nice little. There's a fire giant here, and there's a player character kind of attacking him. I can't tell if he's holding her or not, but it's a nice piece of artwork. And then on the back, this is what it looks like, and there's kind of a hellhound here. And I like this. It's kind of glossy here and then kind of matte here. I like that effect. One thing that you'll hear a lot of people mention, and that I agree with, these are very nice looking books. They're saying that all of them are. The one I've seen so far, the Player's Handbook, is a very nice looking book, and it's well designed inside, nice artwork, nice layout, nice presentation. So no doubt of that. So let's get to, I guess, sort of my thoughts after having looked at it and kind of read through it a little bit and all that. First of all, I have to say this is, as 5th edition, I think, is as much of a attempt to get people thinking differently about what fantasy role-playing is or can be, as it is a new set of technical rules. And I'll go into more of that here in a little bit. But a lot of, some of the text, some of the way they talk about things, a lot of the artwork really encourages you to think differently about what fantasy role-playing might be. And it's just really kind of saturated throughout the rules or this book and the artwork and everything. So I really doubt that's on accident. I'm sure that is a purposeful decision on the game designers. Myself, D&D to me, I've been playing since the role-playing games in general and D&D since the 80s, early to mid-80s. I think I really got into D&D around 8th grade. I've been playing other role-playing games before then. But anyway, so for me, D&D is your traditional medieval fantasy. It's medieval kind of setting with fantasy, magic items and monsters and stuff introduced, and fantastic races. That to me is what D&D is, and that's probably for me what D&D will always be, because I'm very much a Tolkien kind of guy, traditional kind of fantasy literature kind of guy, and the original designers and developers of Dungeons and Dragons, Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson and their crew were the same. So to them, that's what D&D was. So for me, this probably isn't going to encourage me to play a female dwarf without a beard, or something like that, and that's one of the more minor examples. There's they're really trying to push the envelope, but there's nothing wrong with what they've done. You know, there's as many different kind of players out there as there are ways to play and think about it. So more power to them. You know, in one area or two, they may have gone a little too far. I don't know. That'll be up to individual players, and passions and opinions will vary. So we'll just leave it at that. So anyway, that's probably the thing that strikes me the most, and I'll show you some stuff to kind of support that, and then we'll get into some other points. So first of all, to explain the cover, they have this right on the inside, and it's basically saying that in this fiery scene illustrated by Tyler Jacobson, congratulations to Tyler Jacobson for making the front cover of the Player's Handbook. The fire giant, it doesn't say that. That was editorializing by me, I guess. Editor's note. The fire giant King Snur, which I'm probably saying wrong, suffering no fools to live, causes hellhounds to join him in confronting unwelcome guests in his home. So that's what the artwork on the front, that's the story that it's telling. So there you go. So there's the title page. And right off the bat, I mean, that's a very cool piece of artwork, but it's not what you'd normally think of a traditional, you know, fantasy role-playing type character. You know, it's almost got an Arabian feel. Of course, it's ethnic. You know, that kind of thing. And it's a very nice piece of artwork. It's very cool. But right off the bat, they're like, you know, this isn't your father's fantasy setting. I'll find some more examples here. And of course there is artwork that is more traditional as well. I don't want to imply that there isn't. So here we go. There's the artwork for Dwarf, and that is a female beardless dwarf. So I don't know where her beard was. I don't know if she shaved or if she doesn't have one. I don't know. But right off the bat, they're like, hey, for the dwarf, we're not going to show you the typical Gimli, you know, kind of dwarf. Here's a female dwarf. She's tough and she can kick butt. For the elf artwork, they're showing Drizzt Do'Urden. I'm probably saying that wrong to all the legions of fans. I apologize. But that's a drow. That's a dark elf. And it even says in here that, you know, your dungeon master may not allow you to play with a dark elf. Here's a more traditional kind of, I guess, elf artwork. Here's the halfling is once again a female halfling playing a lute, having a good time. And then, like I said, there's nothing wrong with a female halfling, but so far we're not really encountering a traditional, you know, archetype. There's the human, okay, not only a female, but ethnic. And once again, if you're, you know, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just pointing out the trend here that I'm seeing, that they're really trying to say, hey, think different about what you can do or what you can be. There's a dragonborn. I have no idea what gender that dragonborn is. I'm not even that big on dragonborn myself. Now here's the gnome. This looks more like a halfling ranger to me. That's very odd. I mean, it's a female gnome with a bow. That's the one piece of artwork I'm like, I don't get. That doesn't look like a gnome to me. But what do I know? Or what do I gnome? Sorry. Here's more of a traditional picture of a gnome. Kind of a gnome sitting at the workbench, tinkering and whatnot. Let's see here. And there's the tiefling. Female tiefling. I guess a male half-orc. I don't know why the half-orc's not, you know, female, but it does have long hair. Here's the half-elf. So that's more of a traditional kind of fantasy look. I guess he's a cleric or something. But anyway, so that's the point I'm trying to make. Is, like I said, once again, I'm not assigning a value judgment. I'm just saying that's something that you'll notice. Is they're really encouraging you to think differently about, you know, what they're trying to break the mold on the kind of the stereotypes and the archetypes. So, and some of the rules stuff like gender, when they get into gender and stuff like that, they're, like, you might want to think different. You can think different if you want. So I really feel that there's an attempt here by the designers to do that. I think most people will be okay with that because there's nothing that says that you can't do a traditional, role playing. And a lot of the settings, the traditional settings of Dungeons and Dragons are referenced in here. Greyhawk and Dragonlance and that sort of thing. Along with some others, Eberron, which I'm not super familiar with, Ravenloft, and some others. So anyway, that's the thing that jumped out at me probably right off the bat. I doubt I'll play a beardless female dwarf, but if somebody wants to, more power to them. So okay, so that's now to go from the philosophical into more of the new rules and the book itself. As you've seen by now, the artwork is very nice, and the design of the book is very nice. The overall design, kudos to the artists, the developer, not the developers, the designers, the art director. They put out a really nice looking book. So I'm not going to take anything away from them, and I imagine that the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide will be of similar quality. So no doubt these are pretty books, and they're fun to flip through, and they should be. A role-playing game rule books, half the fun of cracking a new game or a new edition is flipping through and, ooh, look at the artwork and all that. So anyone who doesn't think that artwork is important to a role-playing game rule books, you don't have to have it, but it adds a lot to set tone and get the creative juices flowing and attach you to a product. There's the wizard. So just another example of kind of breaking the mold. It kind of reminds me of the Magi from the kind of the New Testament. That's kind of reminds me of the three wise men of yore. Let's see. So very nice races. Let's get into races here. I'll tell you what races you have. You've got dwarf, elf, halfling, human, dragonborn, gnome, half-elf, half-orc, and tiefling. So those are your races. And I think in the free rules you have dwarf, elf, halfling, and human, and that's it. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more races in the player's handbook. And each race, just like other editions of Dungeons and Dragons, each race has pluses and minuses, and we're not even really minuses. That's something I notice here. And keep in mind, I have nothing to do with 4th edition. First, second, third didn't have anything to do with 3.5 or 4th edition, and now I'm kind of getting into 5th. So there may be some stuff I notice here that people are like, oh, no, that's been like that, but for me it's new. It used to, like a lot of the races, you're like, oh, well, you can get a plus here, but you get a disadvantage here, especially in your ability scores. And everything in here is just ability score increases. So that's one thing I noticed. But it's just like other things. You pick a race, pick a sub race, etc., and you get certain changes to your character based on that. And they have, I don't think there's any minimum ability requirements. But every race, I'm looking at the halfling right now, you get a description, you get sort of an intro text from prose from a novel kind of setting, hey, this is what this race is kind of about, and it's, like this one's R.A. Salvatore, the Crystal Shard, talking about Regis the halfling. You kind of get a little, hey, you get this advantage or this rule or whatever applies to you. They give you kind of how this race relates to other races, and you get name suggestions or examples, stuff like that. So, nicely done. So that's the races. I'm assuming that you're probably familiar with that from role-playing games. If not, if this is all completely new to you, a video like this, it's really hard for me to, I could do a whole video on races in video game or in role-playing games. So speaking of videos, if you like this video, please do me a favor, hit like in YouTube, the little thumbs up, and then leave a comment. That helps me a lot. So I'd appreciate it if you did that, and of course visit the companion blog post. Okay, so classes. Here's the classes that you get. Barbarian. I like barbarians. I always have. Bards, clerics, druids, fighters, monks, paladins, rangers, rogues, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. So, and I think from the basic rules, you had a cleric, fighter, rogue, and wizard, and I think that was it. So you get, let's see, I've got some notes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 new playable classes in the player's handbook. So if you're curious about, well, what if I just play the free rules? Well, this is what you get with the player's handbook. So, and I'm gonna, I could just once again do a whole video or a series of videos on these individual classes, but I really like the paladin. One thing I wanted to mention, and this kind of surprised me, because you got to remember I'm old school. Paladins are no longer restricted to, now they still have restrictions on their behavior, but used to paladins like lawful good, code of behavior, that's it. If you break it, you lose your paladin powers, because you're, it's kind of like a cleric. There's like a deity that gives you your powers and whatnot, and if you stray from how you're supposed to behave, you lose those powers. I think it's called, I can't believe I forget the name. It's like Fallen or something like that. But what they've done here is they've given different kinds of oaths. There's the oath of devotion, the oath of the ancients, and the oath of vengeance. And depending on the oath you take, then you have a kind of you have tenets. Like, for example, if you do the oath of the devotion, I think, yeah, then your tenets are honesty, don't lie or cheat, let your word be your promise, courage, never fear to act, though caution is wise, compassion, aid others, protect the weak, and punish those who threaten them, etc., honor, duty. And that's kind of more like your traditional paladin. And then the oath of the ancients, you're trying to kind of give it's almost like you're a druidic paladin. You're kind of fighting for the light and nature and growing things and fighting the darkness. And the oath of vengeance, you're almost like Batman, like you've sworn vengeance, and you have a different code of behavior, and each of them comes with their own different powers. Now, best I can tell, the paladin, you still, I think, and your dungeon master can work differently with you, but I still think that you're pretty much supposed to be good, right? But you don't have to be lawful good. There's other ways to be good other than the lawful good. And a lot of people call lawful good lawful stupid. I don't. I think it can lead to some interesting role playing, but and everybody's different. Another thing that wanted to point out here is you have Yeah, you get proficiency on certain saving throws with each class. Like, for example, the monk gets strength and dexterity as a proficiency for saving throws, so they get bonuses to those kind of saving throws. Everything, you get hit dice, skills that they can choose from. As they progress in levels, they get different, proficiency bonuses and all that stuff. So that's very, very, expected from other editions of D&D and then other role-playing games. I mean, if they ever got away from that system of leveling, first through 20th and above, and increasing with powers and hit points and all that, I would be stunned. Not that it couldn't happen, but I would be surprised. So, let's see. The other thing was the Warlock. And the Warlock is fairly new to me because I didn't play 4th edition. Now, it may have been a prestige class from, other editions, but I'm not real familiar with the Warlock. And I was like, why we got a Warlock? We already got a Wizard. Hold on a second. Yes, that is a Yoda mug, just in case you're curious. So, but Warlocks basically get their powers from not necessarily deities, but other worldly beings. So the traditional Warlock in literature and fantasy has made a pact or something with a demonic force and gets their power that way. Uses the power of demons, which that doesn't interest me. I don't want to go anywhere near that. Somebody else wants to, knock yourself out. But what they've done is it's kind of like the Paladin. They've given you different paths. So you can, let's see here. Yeah, they give you different kinds of patrons, and one is the Archfey. You're basically you've got some sort of relationship, whether it's mutually beneficial or you're a servant of this other being or whatever, and you're basically a very powerful Fey, kind of fairy type character or entity. Like some examples they give are the Prince of Frost, the Queen of Air and Darkness, ruler of the Gloaming Court, Titania of the Summer Court, her consort Oberon, A Midsummer Night's Dream kind of stuff, the Green Lord, etc. And ancient hags. I'm not sure if I'd want to make a pact with an ancient hag. But if you do that, you get certain kinds of powers and spells and whatnot. And then there's the Fiend, and that is the typical, almost like Faust, I'm going to make a deal with the devil and I get powers. Okay? And, they give examples of Demogorgon, Orcus, Baphomet, Asmodeus, Despater, Mephistopheles, Belial. I just don't even want to mess with that stuff. But you can if you want. And then the Great Old One. This, I was reading this thing and I went, let's see. I was reading some examples, and it said, sometimes while poring over tomes of forbidden lore, a brilliant but crazed student's mind is open to realities beyond the material world and to alien beings that dwell in the outer void. And I'm like, man, that sounds like Lovecraft. And boom, right here, one of the ways you can be the Archfey, the Fiend, or the Great Old One. And it says straight up, your patron is a mysterious entity whose nature is utterly foreign to the fabric of reality. And they say entities of this type include some unpronounceable stuff. And then boom, right off, Great Cthulhu. So that's one of the possibilities. Zargon, Dendar the Night Serpent, Therazden the Chain God, Great Cthulhu, and other unfathomable beings. So Cthulhu, if he hadn't already, has officially entered the Dungeons and Dragons world. So and you can serve him if you want. So strange, but there it is. So and just due to the nature of time, I'm going to have to move on. The nature of time, that sounded a bit philosophical. Due to time reasons, I have to move on. So let's see, what else do we got here? I don't know why I made this note at this point, but this book costs $50. So I'm not saying don't spend $50 on it. I'm just saying it costs $50, and that's pretty expensive for one core rule book. So I have a feeling that they do a staggered release. You know, it's like the Player's Handbook in a couple months. We'll get the Monster Manual in a couple of months after that. I think in October we'll get the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I'm guessing they're all going to be about $50. So not even including tax, if you pay full retail price, that's $150 for the core rulebook set for 5th edition. That's not cheap. So I'm thinking that, you know, this staggered release is not only to help the editorial team keep their sanity, so they're not trying to get 3 books out at the same time, but it's also to kind of, you know, well, you know, so you're not seeing that $150. It's just $50, then $50, then $50. So once again, I'm not saying don't spend $50. I'm just pointing out it's $50. So, you know, that seems a little steep to me. But, you know, we're idiots, RPG players. We're done. We'll just plunk it down. And you can go to Amazon and pre-order and save about $20. So I just want to point that out. If you don't mind waiting till the official street date on these books. So that's something. Combat, like I said, I don't know why I put that price note in there. I love this art. I love this right there. This kind of reminds me of older, like 1st edition, where they kind of broke down the 4th wall, and, you know, they're kind of, oh, okay, well, here's how the different breath weapons and stuff work, the different patterns of their attack. Anyway, combat is about 10 pages in this book. So I'm not going to go through all the combat rules. I just mentioned that to say that, you know, the concept here, or, you know, you will hear people mention that it's kind of a rules light compared to other editions of D&D. And I know combat in 3rd edition was pretty detailed. And I'm assuming 4th edition too, from what I've seen of 4th edition and heard of it in podcasts I've listened to. They've really pared it down here. You've still got a pretty nice combat system. It's not, you know, it's not rock, paper, scissors or anything that dumbed down by any means. It's just, you know, they give you the basics and they're like, there you go. That's it, you know. And I'm sure people will do house rules, and there'll be other rule supplements that come out of, you know, if people want to play them. But that's it, you know, 10 pages of combat rules. The attacks of opportunity have basically not disappeared, but have, you know, there is an opportunity attack that can happen under certain circumstances. But I remember 3rd edition, you had a whole section, here's how attacks of opportunity work, and that's gone. They mentioned that grids, playing on a grid, and I'm just, you know, going through the combat stuff. I know you get itchy to see the book every now and then. Playing on a grid, that's a variant rule now. So, you know, you got your grid, each square is 5 foot, and, you know, it kind of helps you control who's where and what rules go into effect. And like in 3rd edition, I don't see how you could have played the combat rules how they were written without playing on a grid. But here they're like, hey, it's optional. I think it's a helpful tool, but, you know, when I first started playing D&D back in the day, when we didn't play on a grid with miniatures, I kind of wish we would have, but we didn't, and we still had a lot of fun. I mean, you know, we'd put our dice down to show marching order, and maybe put some other dice around for monsters, and that was about it. We didn't know what 5 foot was versus this versus that versus whatever. Of course, that was 1st edition. So saving throws. I've heard a few people mention this. They're kind of excited about this. I'm like, well, yeah, whatever. But I'll mention it because I know the other people are interested. Saving throws now include all attributes, or attributes including charisma. So there are now charisma saving throws. And let's see if I can find an example of a charisma saving throw for you. I won't spend a whole lot of time on it. But I know that a lot of people thought that was kind of neat. So, 179 saving throws. See if it mentions it. See if it gives an example of charisma here. It doesn't, but it does give a list of charisma checks. So there are ability checks that use charisma: deception, intimidation, performance, persuasion, etc. But anyway, evidently, you know, and I'm going off what I've heard other people mention. I haven't actually read that in here myself, so if that's incorrect, I apologize. But evidently, there's charisma saving throws, which makes sense because there are spells and abilities and etc. that depend on charisma to determine the power of the effect, strength of the effect. So Feats is now an optional rule, which that's interesting to me. I guess they're kind of going with that rules light. I like Feats systems. I'm a big fan of Feats. I think they're neat and can do a lot, but they've made it optional. And what they've said is there's a as you progress with your character, you get like every few levels, you get an ability score improvement. So like, you know, I hit 4th level as a sorcerer, and I can improve one of my ability scores by, I guess, a point. Instead of that, there's an optional rule if you want to feats. Instead of improving an ability score, you can pick a feat. So that's how they're doing it. Now, some DMs may allow both. They may say, well, you can do both if you want, and you know, that's cool. But the way they're suggesting doing it is to substitute the feat for the ability score improvement. And there's some nice feats in here. I'm kind of in the feats section. I don't know how well you can read that. I'll do a couple that jumped out at me. Let's see. I think it was Tavern Brawl. Yeah, Tavern Brawler. Accustomed to rough and tumble fighting using whatever weapons at hand, you gain the following benefits. Increase your strength or constitution by 1. You are proficient with improvised weapons and unarmed strikes. Your unarmed strikes use D4 for damage. And when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike or an improvised weapon on your turn, you can use a bonus action to attempt to grapple the target. So you've been in a few brawls in your life, and you know how to get in there and do some fighting. Let's see, sharpshooter, that helps you with your ranged weapons. Tough, you can raise your hit points. Let's see, there's Mage Slayer, your practice techniques useful in melee combat against spellcasters. Mobile, you can increase your speed. Lucky, you have luck points that you can use to help your dice rolls. You get the point. Dungeon Delver, alert to hidden traps and secret doors found in many dungeons. You gain the following benefits, etc. So it looks like there's, I'm going to guess 25 feats in here maybe. I'm sure there'll be others in supplements and, you know, people will house rule some other feats probably. I'm going to guess about 30 or 35. But so that's the feats thing. They've changed that. Inspiration. This is cool. If you haven't already heard about this inspiration rule, basically the Dungeon Master can give you what's called inspiration for good role-playing, basically. Says your DM can choose to give you inspiration for a variety of reasons. Typically, DMs award it when you play out your personality traits given to the drawbacks presented by a flower bond and otherwise portray your character in a compelling way. So there's a whole section in here devoted to backgrounds. And that's where you add basically kind of interesting backgrounds to your character. For example, they have the folk hero background, which is right here. And you come from a humble social rank, but you are destined for so much more. Already the people of your home village regard you as their champion, etc. So it gives you some extra skill proficiencies, some tool proficiencies. It gives you some starting equipment. And you get a defining event, like you might say, I led a militia to fight off an invading army. There's like a table you roll on. I guess you could just choose it if you want. But you get personality traits. For example, I misuse long words and attempt to sound smarter, or I judge people by their actions, not their words, etc. So you get a personality trait, you get an ideal. Like I said, I doubt the resolution is good enough for you to see that. You get a bond and a flaw. And you roll, or I guess the DM can maybe let you pick, and you add these to your character. And as you play the game, if you play these like they're supposed to be played, the Dungeon Master can reward you inspiration. And you can only have one inspiration at a time. It doesn't stack. And you can use it to help your dice rolls. You can also, if you have a point of inspiration, 1 point, that's all you can ever have, and somebody else at the table that you're playing with does something really cool with your character, you can be like, hey, I'm going to give you my inspiration. I don't know how often people will do that, but you can do it if you want. And so if you have inspiration, you can expend it when you make an attack roll, saving throw, or ability check. Spending your inspiration gives you advantage on that roll. So that leads into advantage and disadvantage, which is an interesting rule in and of itself. Let me find it here. Is it under combat? Here it is, 173. It's under using ability scores. Okay, so advantage and disadvantage. This is an interesting rule. So sometimes a special ability or spell tells you that you have advantage or disadvantage on an ability check, a saving throw, or an attack roll. When that happens, you roll a second d20 when you make the roll. So normally you roll a d20. This you roll 2. Use the higher of the two rolls if you have advantage, and use the lower roll if you have disadvantage. It's that simple. So, neat rule, simple, easy to use. If you have advantage, you roll 2 dice. If you have disadvantage, you roll 2 dice. And if you have advantage, you take the higher. If you have disadvantage, you take the lower. So, inspiration gives you advantage, and then other abilities, spells, situations will give you either advantage or disadvantage in the game. So I really like that rule. It's simple. It adds something cool to the game without making it complex and hard to keep track of. So, in fact, I saw some playtesting videos from Wizards of the Coast where they were playtesting 5th edition, and the DM would actually hand like this colored dice to a character. Hey, I'm giving you inspiration. You're like, oh, okay, I have an inspiration, and you just roll it along with your normal roll, and it reminds you that you have inspiration because it's sitting there next to you. So that was nice. Yeah, the background kind of already went over. You know, you can choose all these different backgrounds, and you get traits and flaws and whatever. And you know, I like that. In addition to, they're trying to get you to kind of break the mold of what is fantasy role-playing setting and stereotypes and all that. They're trying to encourage role-playing. And you know, I'm one of those guys. I like role-playing in a role-playing game because you can either role-play, R-O-L-L, play, or you can role-play, R-O-L-E, play. And I like a mix. I like the hack and slash combat, kaboom, bam. Ooh, let's see how the math all works out. But I also like the role-playing. So this setting, these rules encourage that. So I like that a lot. A couple of things I'll mention real quick, and then I'll wrap. The trinkets on your starting, I don't know, I don't remember seeing this before. Maybe it's been around before, but you get, on your starting equipment, you know, you get wealth and all that stuff. But they also did this neat little thing where they give you a trinket table to roll on. Here's the trinkets. So it's just a table and little weird stuff. But you roll a D100, so either, you know, 2 D10s or a D100, and you get one, and it's like, it could be an enormous skill, perhaps from a dragon, a single caltrop made from bone, a rabbit's foot, a glass eye, a shard of obsidian that always feel warm to the touch, a glass orb filled with water in which swims a clockwork goldfish, a whistle made from gold-colored wood, a metal urn containing the ashes of a hero. So it's just neat. A lot of stuff, there's no explanation to why, or, you know, you can just work it into your role-playing. A tooth from an unknown beast. So I like that. It kind of reminds me, if you're keeping up with Numenera, it kind of reminds me of Numenera from Numenera. And Numenera are these relics of past ages that are super high advanced technology. You know, like Arthur C. Clarke says, any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. And that's kind of how this plays out in Numenera. And you have tables that you can roll on, and you get these cool little things. Well, the Trinkets is kind of like that. It's just this, wow, what is this? It kind of gets you thinking, oh, that's neat. So I like the Trinkets that you start with one of those. And then the last thing I'll mention, you know, other than the fact, of course, there's spells, and, you know, you got all the typical stuff in here, some old favorite spells, and etc. You have an appendix with the planes of existence. The alignment system, as I mentioned with the Paladin, is still in the game. You know, there's the planes of existence. You'll be down there on the material plane. But it gets into deities. There's an appendix devoted to deities, and what I thought was kind of neat. Oh, this is kind of neat too. I'm surprised I didn't mention this. Is the conditions. It gives you the conditions. And it gives you some neat little artwork explaining the conditions. Invisible and petrified and frightened, charmed, paralyzed, restrained, unconscious, stunned, etc. But the deities section is they've included deities from major campaign settings: Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, Dragonlance, Eberron, then just non-human deities. Loth, Drow, goddess of spiders, but they've also included deities from historical settings of Earth, of our history, the Celtic deities, Greek, Egyptian, Norse. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then there's an appendix on the outer planes. Or the outer planes, which I showed you, kind of how the universe is made up. There's a few creatures included, just, you know, while you're waiting on the monster manual. A few pages of creatures here. Inspirational reading, just, hey, kind of, you might want to read this for inspiration, which has an introduction that Gary Gygax, I mean, like the dude, him and Dave Arneson did the original Dungeons and Dragons, but it's something he wrote in 1979 for the official Dungeon Master's Guide. So there's a whole lot more in here. You know, if you're a D&D fan, I mean, pick it up. I think they're doing a good job with 5th edition. The books are well done. I mean, they're not little cheapies. You know, you can even buy it just to look through the artwork, that sort of thing. So, you know, should you buy it? You know, $50 is a lot of money. But if you're going to use it, if you're going to role play, if you're going to have fun with your friends and all that stuff, definitely. If you're a completist, a collector, definitely. If you're kind of casual in your gaming group, you might play a little bit, and one of them's already going to have the books. You know, I use your best judgment. Because if you're hardcore into it, you want all the books, you're going to spend $150. So, you know, unless you order off Amazon or something and save a little bit of money. But if you're going to play a lot, if this is your hobby, and everybody's always known that role-playing games are an expensive hobby, yeah, definitely pick it up. I want to support 5th edition. They're doing some cool stuff here, so I hope that 5th edition is a well-used and well-supported edition. You know, these guys have worked hard on it. I don't agree with everything they're doing, you know, but I can't think of any role-playing game that I've agreed with everything. You know, there's going to be lovers and haters and all that stuff. So anyway, I really appreciate you watching this video. I hope you got something out of it. I hope that you're like, oh, that answers some questions, or I know a little bit more about the Player's Handbook in 5th edition now. As always, thank you for watching Shane Plays. If, like I said, if you like the video, please like it on YouTube. Do a little thumbs up. Maybe leave a comment. Check out the companion blog post, which will be in the comments on the video at shaneplays.com. Or the blog post will be at shaneplays.com. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time in watching this. So have a great day, and we'll see you soon on Shane Plays. You want to see Yoda again? Good review that. Well, no, that's not how he talks. Good review that was. Is that how he talks? I don't know. Anyway, I'm just going to drink from his head. Being good review it was. I don't know. Have a good one.